What happens when a Hollywood legend calls out a royal in front of a live studio audience? Meghan Markle thought she was walking into a safe, cozy interview. What she got was a televised takedown so brutal, it left the internet gasping. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping confrontation that has everyone talking, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments. Was Cameron speaking the truth, or did she go too far? It was just another taping day at the View. The studio was bright, the audience full, and the energy light and cheerful. People chatted quietly in their seats as camera operators made last-minute adjustments. There was no hint of tension, no sign that the show was about to take a turn no one would forget. It felt like any other day in Studio 1A. Whoopi Goldberg smiled as she welcomed viewers and introduced the guests. On her left sat Meghan Markle, poised and elegant in a cream blazer. Her hair was tucked neatly behind one ear, and she carried that polished grace she had become known for. Next to her, across the table, was Cameron Diaz. She looked effortlessly confident in a denim shirt and heels, her blonde hair catching the lights as she laughed, along with the hosts. The opening topic was simple enough: charity work, empowerment, motherhood. Meghan spoke warmly about her recent projects focused on helping women and girls around the world. She used words like compassion, resilience, and community. The audience responded with polite applause, some nodding in agreement. Cameron followed with her own thoughts on giving back. She shared stories from her environmental work and mentioned stepping away from Hollywood to focus on things that truly mattered to her. Her tone was relaxed, easygoing, even a little playful. Meghan smiled and nodded as Cameron spoke, and for a few minutes, it looked like the two women had a mutual understanding. They were both public figures, using their platforms for good. They were both mothers. They were both admired for their independence. The conversation moved smoothly. The View hosts leaned in with interest. Everyone seemed comfortable. No one in that room, including the audience or the production team, could have guessed what was coming next. But all of that was about to change. It was just another taping day at the View. The studio was bright, the audience full, and the energy light and cheerful. People chatted quietly in their seats as camera operators made last-minute adjustments. There was no hint of tension, no sign that the show was about to take a turn no one would forget. It felt like any other day in Studio 1A. Whoopi Goldberg smiled as she welcomed viewers and introduced the guests. On her left sat Meghan Markle, poised and elegant in a cream blazer. Her hair was tucked neatly behind one ear, and she carried that polished grace she had become known for. Next to her, across the table, was Cameron Diaz. She looked effortlessly confident in a denim shirt and heels, her blonde hair catching the lights as she laughed, along with the hosts. The opening topic was simple enough: charity work, empowerment, motherhood. Meghan spoke warmly about her recent projects focused on helping women and girls around the world. She used words like compassion, resilience, and community. The audience responded with polite applause, some nodding in agreement. Cameron followed with her own thoughts on giving back. She shared stories from her environmental work and mentioned stepping away from Hollywood to focus on things that truly mattered to her. Her tone was relaxed, easygoing, even a little playful. Meghan smiled and nodded as Cameron spoke, and for a few minutes, it looked like the two women had a mutual understanding. They were both public figures, using their platforms for good. They were both mothers. They were both admired for their independence. The conversation moved smoothly. The View hosts leaned in with interest. Everyone seemed comfortable. No one in that room, including the audience or the production team, could have guessed what was coming next. But all of that was about to change. Then came the question that changed everything. Joy Behar, always known for keeping things lively, leaned forward with a casual smile and asked, "How do you both handle privacy in the public eye?" It sounded innocent. Just another question to keep the conversation flowing. But something in the room shifted the moment those words landed. Meghan adjusted slightly in her seat. She smiled, but it was tighter than before. Her voice softened as she answered, and it was clear this was something she had said many times before. She spoke about the non-stop attention, the tabloid headlines, and the pressure to maintain a perfect image. She said that every choice, every outfit, every move was dissected by the media. That it was exhausting to always be under a microscope. She made a point to talk about how protecting her family had become more important than pleasing the public. Cameron listened quietly. She kept her expression calm, but her body language told a different story. She leaned back just slightly. Her smile faded, and there was a new tension in her jaw. She tilted her head and looked at Meghan with a kind of curiosity that felt more like a challenge. The warmth that had filled the studio minutes earlier started to cool. It was not what Cameron said right away. It was how she looked, how her hands stopped moving, how her eyes narrowed just a little. There was something simmering, like she was waiting for the right moment to speak. And when she finally did, everything changed. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button for more explosive moments like this. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Because this was only the beginning. What came after was unscripted, raw, and unforgettable. Cameron leaned forward, just a little, enough to shift the energy in the room. Her smile was still there, but it had changed. It no longer reached her eyes. She looked directly at Meghan and said, "That is interesting, Meghan. I have been in this business for over 20 years, and I never really felt the need to control my narrative. Maybe it is just how you approach the whole thing." The words were calm, even friendly on the surface, but the tone underneath said something else. The studio felt it. A few people in the audience let out soft gasps. The hosts shifted in their seats. Meghan's face stayed neutral, but her body tensed. It was small, just a quick adjustment in her posture, but it said a lot. She responded with grace, her voice steady, eyes focused. "Well, Cameron, I think everyone's experience is different," she said. "When your family is being targeted, especially your children, it stops being about image. It becomes about protection." Cameron nodded slowly, like she was considering the words. But then she added, "Of course, family is everything. I just think sometimes people make their lives more complicated than they need to be." She let out a light laugh. "I stepped away from Hollywood for years. I disappeared. Nobody wrote stories about my mental health or my in-laws." The audience was completely silent now. You could feel the tension creeping in, wrapping around the studio like a heavy fog. Meghan stayed calm, but you could see the strain. Her jaw tightened. Her hands pressed gently against her lap. Cameron was not done. She glanced over at Meghan again and said, "There is a difference between being private and being, well, performatively private. You know what I mean." Her voice was light, but her words landed hard. Meghan took a breath. You could see the wheels turning in her head. The practiced calm, the trained media response, all of it was working overtime. But the first strike had landed, and it was clear this was no longer a casual chat between celebrities. This was a clash, and it was just getting started. The moment Meghan realized the conversation had shifted into dangerous territory, she changed gears. Her voice softened, but her words carried a heavier weight. She leaned forward slightly and took a long breath before speaking. "Look, Cameron," she began, steady but emotional. "You may think this is about attention or branding, but for me, it has always been about survival." The studio quieted even more. The audience leaned in. Meghan continued, her eyes focused straight ahead. "There was a time," she said, "when I felt completely alone, isolated, not just by the media, but by an entire system built to protect tradition over people. My mental health suffered. I was told to smile through it. I was told to be grateful, but no one asked if I was okay." The shift in energy was immediate. A few people in the audience nodded. Others looked uneasy. Meghan's voice quivered just enough to feel real, but she was clearly trying to hold herself together. "You talk about choice," she added, now looking straight at Cameron. "But choice is a privilege. Walking away from a career and returning when you feel ready is a luxury. I had reporters camped outside my home. I had tabloids printing lies about my child before he could speak." Cameron said nothing, but her jaw had tightened. Meghan seized the silence. "When you marry into a system like that," Meghan said, "you do not get to make decisions the way other people do. You are either silent or shamed." And when I finally did speak, when I finally said, "I am not okay," I was called dramatic, manipulative, even a liar. A hush fell across the room. Meghan's voice dropped again, almost like a whisper, but it was strong. "So no, you may not understand what it is like to be trapped, to be voiceless, to be viewed as a threat simply for existing. But I lived it. I survived it, and I will not apologize for speaking my truth." The audience broke into cautious applause. Some were clearly moved, others still looked unsure. And on social media, the divide was immediate. #Team Meghan started trending. People began taking sides. Some called her brave. Others called it performance. But one thing was certain, she had turned the tide, at least for now. Cameron leaned back slightly, letting Meghan's words hang in the air. For a brief moment, it looked like she might let it go. But then she sat forward again, her eyes sharp, her tone firmer than ever. "Let me get this straight. Cameron," said voice calm but cutting. "You married into one of the most powerful families in the world. You lived in castles. You had security, status, and a global platform. Then you walked away. And instead of disappearing into privacy like you claimed you wanted, you signed multi-million-dollar deals, launched a podcast, wrote a memoir, and did a primetime interview with Oprah. That is not oppression. That is a public relations strategy." The words hit hard. You could hear a pin drop in the studio. Meghan opened her mouth to respond, but Cameron kept going. Her pace quickened, her voice rising with every sentence. "You were an actress. Then you became a duchess. Then you branded yourself as a victim. And now, you are positioning yourself as a media mogul. That is not survival, that is reinvention. Over and over again. And every time someone criticizes you, you act like it is an attack on your existence." Meghan tried to speak, raising a hand as if to pause the momentum, but Cameron ignored it. She was locked in. "I have no problem with women taking control of their image," Cameron added. "But do not sit here and pretend that you are powerless. You are not. You have influence most people could never dream of, and you have used it not to build bridges, but to gather sympathy. To paint yourself as the only victim in a world full of real struggle. Behind the cameras, the hosts were clearly rattled. Whoopi glanced nervously off stage. Joy shifted in her seat. A producer whispered something into an earpiece. But Cameron was too far in now to be stopped. You hijacked the global conversation on mental health and racism and turned it into your personal brand. You made everything about you. Your pain, your truth, your journey. Meanwhile, people who actually need help, who live through these things every day, are left unheard. The audience was frozen. Some nodded quietly. Others stared wide-eyed. This was no longer just a debate. It was a complete dismantling. And Meghan, she sat motionless, her expression unreadable, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Cameron had thrown down the gauntlet, and everyone knew it. This was not just a clapback, it was a full-on counterattack. And the battle was only getting started. Meghan's voice broke. The tension that had been building finally spilled over as her eyes filled with tears. She reached for a tissue, tried to hold it together, but the emotion cracked through anyway. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I am trying to be authentic, she said, barely above a whisper. I am just sharing my truth. That is all I have ever tried to do. The audience was dead quiet. You could feel the discomfort stretch across every inch of the studio. Even the hosts looked frozen, unsure whether to step in or let it play out. Cameron did not flinch. She leaned in a little more, her voice sharp but still calm. Tears do not erase contradictions. Meghan, she said, you cannot cry your way out of accountability. Not here. Meghan's face was red now, her hand shaking slightly as she wiped beneath her eyes. She looked hurt, raw, stripped of the royal polish she had carried in with her. I have gone through a lot, she said. You have no idea what it is like to lose control of your own life, to be judged for everything, to be hated for simply existing. Cameron nodded slowly, then responded without missing a beat. And yet, here you are, on a major talk show, speaking into a camera, with book deals, Netflix specials, Spotify contracts, and global headlines. You are not voiceless. You are not powerless. You are a brand. One built on victimhood. Meghan looked stunned. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. You say you are trying to be authentic, Cameron continued, but you have reinvented yourself more times than Madonna. Actress, duchess, victim, entrepreneur, political figure. What exactly are you trying to be today? The line landed like a punch. A few gasps came from the crowd. One person in the front row raised their phone, quietly recording despite the no filming rule. Meghan tried to speak again, but the words faltered in her throat. The weight of Cameron's words, the force behind them, had left a mark, and the room knew it. This was no longer a conversation. This was a reckoning. Cameron looked right at her. Calm, clear, unshaken. People want honesty, she said, not theatrics, not a performance, and certainly not tears when the spotlight gets uncomfortable. It was brutal, it was bold, and it left Meghan silent, her hands clenched around the tissue, as the studio sat in stunned silence. Meghan stood up. Slowly, her hands were trembling, her eyes still wet from tears. She opened her mouth to speak, searching for the right words, but nothing came out, just silence. Her body language said everything. Hurt, exhaustion, maybe even defeat. The camera stayed on her, tracking every step as she moved to the edge of the set. She paused, one hand gripping the back of her chair. It looked like she wanted to say one last thing, maybe a comeback, maybe a goodbye. But her lips just quivered, and nothing came. Cameron sat perfectly still, watching her. Her expression was unreadable, but her words came out clear and cold. Running away is your go-to move, is it not? She said. Every time things get tough, you walk out. From the royal family, from responsibility, and now from this. The words hit hard. Meghan flinched but kept moving. No more attempts to speak. No more fight, just one foot in front of the other until she was gone. The studio was dead silent. Not even a whisper from the audience. The hosts sat frozen, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief. The camera held on Meghan's empty seat for a moment longer, then slowly panned back to Cameron, who remained calm and composed. In that instant, social media lit up. Clips were already being posted. Reactions were flying in. The walk-off had become the moment. One that people would replay, debate, and never forget. Cameron sat back in her chair and looked straight into the camera. Her voice was steady, her eyes focused. There was no anger, no smugness, just clarity. The difference between being famous and being significant, she said, is what you do with your moment. Meghan had hers, and she wasted it. The studio stayed quiet. No applause, no reaction. Just the weight of her words hanging in the air. Cameron continued, still calm. Some people use their platform to create change. Others use it to build a brand. One is about purpose, the other is about performance. She glanced around briefly, then looked back into the lens. Authenticity is not a costume. It is not something you put on for a show. It is who you are when nobody is watching. That was it. No need to shout. No final jab, just a closing thought that landed with power. Cameron did not have to declare victory. The audience already knew who walked away with the last word, and it was not the one who walked off the stage. What just happened was the moment that shook daytime television. A clash between two powerful women played out in front of millions. Meghan Markle walked off the set. Cameron Diaz stayed seated, calm and sharp to the very end. The fallout is already brewing. Behind the scenes, producers are scrambling. Clips are going viral. And people are asking the same question across social media. Did Meghan's image just take a major hit? Cameron called out what she saw as a pattern. Meghan tried to show vulnerability. One leaned into facts. The other leaned into feelings. And somewhere in the middle, the audience had to decide who they believed. So now we turn it over to you. Was Cameron cruel or just brutally honest? Do you think Meghan walked away because she was hurt or because she had no more answers? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear every side. And if you want more real, unfiltered breakdowns of the biggest celebrity showdowns, hit that subscribe button right now. You do not want to miss what comes next.